And then extending your breath to encompass everyone, quite naturally, moving on from there. Let's repeat the Sufi Invocation together. Toward the One, the perfection of love, harmony and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the Master, the Spirit of guidance. Let's do this wazifa practice that is a Kamal practice in the sense it balances Jalal and Jamal, and it also invokes the transcendental absolute. It's Dhul, which is the Dhul, Ya Dhul Jalali Wal Ikram. 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 Continuing on the breath, breathing in Ya Dhal Jalali Wal Ikram, breathing out Ya Dhal Jalali Wal Ikram. As we breathe this in Ya Dhal, we connect with that silent life, the formless absolute, out of which both the Jalal and the Jamal qualities all emanate. So, as Hazrat Inayat Khan says, the secret of life is to have a rhythm that is harmonious for you in this world, and at the same time to never lose touch with the infinite, with the eternal. So the Dhal is the eternal absolute quality, the undying essence that is in the emptiness itself. And so we connect with that as we breathe in the Dhal, and from that flowing, we see in equal measure flowing strength and beauty in all of its manifestations right into our life. So let's do this Fikr of this practice, doing it on the breath, taking a nice long breath, connecting with the infinite, eternal, silent life, and drawing it right into this manifestation here, feeling the Jalal and Jamal of it balanced in our being. This is a good practice to do if you need to come into balance in the course of the day, and to repeat this mantra, to do the breath of it. It's a very good balancing practice. We do it a lot on retreat for people to experience a grounding in the two streams of Jalal and Jamal, and to do and grounding in the infinite reality at the same time. I wanted to just go a little further tonight before returning to some of our texts and any questions that you might have on this whole subject of. Let's just look at a couple of more wazifas in the same way that we looked at the astrological walks as a way of understanding how they represent and can enhance our appreciation of the rising energy of the Uruj and the letting go and falling energy of the Zaval. And the two I'm going to present are Ya Quddus and Ya Jami. And Ya Quddus is the purifier. The root of the word means to return home. And it has to do with that exhalation that we take, letting go of everything that's transient. So that's like the soul letting off ballast. All the heavy stuff that holds it down, we let go of, and in so doing, the soul is freeing itself by simplifying and letting go. So as we're exhaling with the Ya Quddus, as the breath goes on, we have this sense of the not only the this action of letting go, but also the buoyancy of your soul, feeling its freedom when it's no longer encumbered by all of the elements, when it's no longer encumbered by all of the impressions that are transient but that have lodged themselves around the globe of the heart, and so that the soul's light is muted. So the Quddus is really the perfection of this Zaval, because it takes it to its necessary completion in returning all the way to the soul's original condition. It's like the journey after death in a certain way, in which when Nur Nisa died, she shouted out "Liberté," because she endured, she maintained her inner authenticity, her inner remembrance in the midst of the most difficult situations, and then so then she felt this release of the soul, that sort of liberty, letting go of all of this that the soul has gotten itself entrapped in, engaged in. And that's that Zaval, you let go of it. The soul naturally returns to its source in that letting go action. So it's balanced by Yajamia, which means the gathering together. Jamiyat comes from that, gathering together, synthesizing, integrating, gathering together. So at the place where you get with your exhalation, with shedding the transiency of the transient impressions that are lodged on the soul, and just feeling the buoyancy of its purified state, its pristine state, emerging as it's being drawn in through that letting go process into the one and only being the when you come to the end of that breath, then from that place that you've reached, you integrate and you pull together a sense of self. You draw it right into your sense of your soul that is exposed to view, and you integrate the qualities that you feel in that realm. So this is now a taking in. It's a naruj. It's a drawing in. It's a pulling into and there's an ecstasy in the emptiness of the letting go, and then there's an ecstasy in the integration into the sense of self in the soul that comes with you integrating this atmosphere that you've reached in the inner space into your sense of soul in the Jamia. So You're exhaling the Ya Quddus. Let's say it. Ya Quddus. Ya Quddus. Ya Quddus. Ya Quddus. Ya Quddus. Now let's do it together. Ya Quddus. Ya Jami. 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 Now, what you feel is, you feel this integration of self. You feel, from this very high place, maybe from this really deep and absolute place. But ever how far you got, you integrate it into the soul. It's pairing this drawing in energy, this bringing things in, this rising force of synthesis, which is like the in-breath, you see. And then after you've completed your in-breath, you have to let go of that sense of self and shed whatever's transient in that space. And so then again you let go through the Quddus, and you feel the ecstasy of the emptiness, and then as you inhale you feel the ecstasy or the joy or the well-being of the fullness of self that you find integrated in the Jami. So it's Quddus, Quddus, Jami, Jami with an I, Jami. So try this on the breath. Experiencing the Zaval, the letting go of it, and seeing just how the important reason I'm doing this is to see how you make use of these natural processes in the breath of Zaval and Uruj to enter into deep spiritual states through the divine qualities that are related to this activity of God in the expansion and contraction, which is here in the letting go and the synthesis. So exhaling, Ya Quddus, letting go of everything that's transient, feeling the soul's buoyancy as it does that, integrating at the conclusion of the breath with the Jami, drawing all that into, synthesizing it into your sense of your real self. So you're embracing the falling and the rising action with these spiritual qualities. You have a question. I'll take some questions, and I wanted to respond to Insu's question before that I couldn't respond to. You said in studying these Tassawuri Murshid materials, one of the things Murshid Inayat Khan says is if you really want to draw close to a being, adopt their rhythm. Understand what their rhythm of life is, because if that person has a very slow rhythm and a stately rhythm, as Inayat Khan did, and he was amazed by all these people that never stopped. They were always so active. Galloping. Prancercising. Whatever.
You watched that?
No, I didn't, but you know, when something goes 4 million viral times, you know, it even reaches my wife, and then you know, she says, "Isn't this ridiculous?" But
sorry,
yeah.
I only saw it the other night.
Well, you know, there's a lot of things like that out there in the YouTube world. But excuse me for making a off-the-cuff reference like that. But I lost my thread where I was going. But
people move so fast.
yeah, right, and that's why they couldn't catch his rhythm. And he even made a point of it in these papers, not talking about himself so much as you know, you'd have to slow down your breath. Murshid said, if you want to do the walk of Hazrat Inayat Khan, slow down your breath first, and breathe with your whole body and feel this, and move with this sense of majesty and stateliness and dignity. You know, because that was his rhythm. Now, Murshid Sam's rhythm was very different from that. His everyday rhythm was very mercurial. He was up in the morning and he got up, you know, running. Or maybe he would get up and he would go walk, he would get up and take a walk to the bakery and pick up stuff at the bakery, and Saul's dog would come down the hill and walk with him, and you know, and Saul said, I found out years later that Murshid was giving him donut holes. No wonder he loved him so much, you know. But, you know, he would be off, you know, and Buddha would be there, they would be off to the bakery or whatever. But he got up and, you know, I would hear him and he'd be going around the front room, he'd be going for, Ya Hayyu wa Ya Qayyum, Ya Hayyu wa Ya Qayyum, Ya Hayyu wa Ya Qayyum, Ya Hayyu wa Ya Qayyum. I mean, his rhythm was, you know, I mean, but he could slow really way down into meditation, and when we did like this walk of Allahu Akbar and being a peacemaker, then you have that sense. But in everyday life, he was going here and there, and people, you know, wouldn't know what to do. You know, I mean, he'd be cooking, but he would be moving like this, and he says, I have bunches of gin that help me in the kitchen, you know. But people would get underfoot, you know, and you have to, if you could match your breath with his, you know, if you could, you know, I found, you know, it was no problem if you were doing something, right? Otherwise, people would just be, you know, but you're sitting there, you're washing the dishes or whatever, it's fine. He's moving back and forth in the kitchen, you're washing the dishes, you know, it all works, you know. But if you're standing there waiting to be, you know. But he would be up and moving, doing practices quick. He had a quick rhythm. His rhythm was very quickening to life. But he could stop on a dime and let it all go. And that's what he said. My secret of being positive is I'm allowed to be positive because when I see that I am off beam, I don't mind in an instant putting my head on the floor, giving it all up and starting fresh. So that gives me permission to exude all this positive energy, because people are afraid of being positive because they don't want to make mistakes and they don't want to use this kind of energy in ways that might be harmful, and so as a result they don't take a chance of succeeding. But he gave himself that permission to act. He said, you know, that early in his life he had tried to be a Gandhian and just always you know, surrendering and turning the other cheek and so on, and he failed at everything. And then when he turned it around and he took the attitude of, you know, asserting his will, then he got tremendous success in every venture. And he felt that his teacher, Hazrat Inayat Khan, was so well-mannered that he hesitated to assert his will in so many situations. And thinking in the Eastern manner, that people should pick it up. They should get it from the nuances of things. Murshid Sam also believed you should know when his yes was no and his no was yes. Seriously, I mean, if I didn't know that, I got in trouble. because he might, out of politeness, say yes, but really mean no. Or he might, Shahabuddin loves to tell the story about when he was there and he was going to go see this fellow that wrote the book on The Secret Life of Plants. He was visiting in New York, and he was going to go see this fellow, and Sitara, who was traveling as his secretary, because I stayed here, and he took her with him to somebody to type for him when he was dictating letters. He said, well, I'll take Sitara with me because she's got a scientific bent of mind. And Shahabuddin is sitting here, and he didn't say anything, and he wanted to go. He said, no, I'm sitting. He said, so he came back, and then he had his meeting, and then Shahabuddin said something to Murshid about it, and he said, well, you should have come. He said, no, well, you should have come, why didn't you come? So what was, he expected you to be enough in sympathetic attunement with him, if you were close to him as a student, to know what his real intention was, and even if he didn't happen to say it. But he made his intentions much more clearer in that way. He didn't hesitate. But so that, he'd be up in the morning, typing, he'd wake me up, either in the front room, doing his practices loud and fast, and then they were over. He'd spent years meditating a long time and so on, but now he'd gotten to the place where he could get there, right? 7 repetitions, he was there, whatever.
It's interesting that he's talked about from the Zen where they went, I don't know, to how many minutes, and then they cooked it back down to where they could do it.
Yeah, right. Senzaki extended their time of meditating, and then he shrunk it down to where it was, okay, get it like that, and that's the kind of meditations he gave. Just come immediately to that awakened condition. Don't hesitate. Speak, intuitively the truth. Don't try and figure it out with the mind. Just speak from the truth of the heart. But he would be up typing a letter to, usually first to Art Hoppe, who was the humor columnist for the San Francisco paper. He must have written him hundreds of letters, and that was just to get started, but he had this tremendous, as Paul Repp said, if you want to understand Sam, you have to understand that when he woke up in the morning and when he went to bed at night and all the time in between, he was determined to be a benefit. He was really a bodhisattva in that way. He wanted to, his energy was to be a benefit. So he was really totally dedicated in that way. But he was very challenging to keep up with, even though Mansur's book is very hard to read. I don't know how many people have read through to the end of it. 4 or 5 out of this group. But it's hard to read because, but one of the things in there that is so fantastic that nobody else has been able to capture is what it was like to live a day with Murshid. Because so much was crammed into it. You couldn't believe, he'd be writing, he'd be going here, he'd be going there. If he wanted to take a break, he'd go out in the garden and crawl down there and get on his hands and knees and pick weeds and do stuff, down there, on the ground, or but he'd take a nap. But he did take a nap most every day for about 40 minutes or so. But he woke up about 5 or so in the morning and kept going until night. And he had this tremendous drive and very, very energetic that way. I never saw anybody with that much energy. Never saw anybody with that much dedication. And that's something about his daily rhythm to respond to it. But the main thing is joy in life. he had tremendous joy. He couldn't restrain it. It would break out in all these different circumstances. You'd be driving him around in the car, and he'd just break out into a song all the time. He couldn't help it. As somebody, who was it? Somebody in Santa Fe, maybe Mabud was saying, he talked to somebody that had known Sam there, and hadn't been his student, but he knew him there in Santa Fe or Taos, and he said, well, how would you describe him? And he said, joy on legs. Yeah, and Houston Smith said he was the happiest person he ever met, and he's now turning 90-something and has met pretty much every spiritual teacher that broke the surface of notice in the world. But so that sense of showing up for life with zest, not being afraid to live, that was his rhythm, full bore right into life, and falling on his face a million times, and getting up, not ever feeling defeated by rejection or by being, which was often the case, getting to something before, being ahead of his time so that he was running into doors that would later be opened, and that was his famous story, that I feel like a gardener that's planted seeds and nothing came up. And then the next year I planted more seeds and nothing came up. And the next year more seeds and nothing came up. And so on year after year, planting seeds and nothing came up. And then one year I planted the seeds and they all came up. And not only all those seeds, but all the seeds from the previous year and all the seeds from... That was his experience at the end of his life. All these seeds that he had planted and with such limited success were all coming up. And now all of a sudden he's saying, what can I do? I can't harvest all of this. And he said, God came to me and said, harvest what you can and leave the rest to me. That was that attitude, to be able to act with positivity year after year, day after day, in the face of rejection, in the face of disinterest, in the face of all of this kind of nothing came up. But next year, more seeds to plant. So that was his inner rhythm was like that. And I think this is a good segue into taking up a few more things I want to emphasize from these practices on Tassawuri and Murshid. I'm just going to read a little bit from this one. Therefore, though every form of this world, natural or artificial, represents to a Sufi God, his or her divine ideal, yet the Sufi chooses a form for the exercise of their mind which may be elevating, which may lead them to the goal at which they wish to arrive, at the same time a form which would raise them and their ideal from ordinary names and forms of this world of variety. As respect and goodwill is due to everybody in life, who directs us to what we wish to attain, much more, perhaps most respect and love is due to the one who directs our soul to the ultimate goal. For that is the most that any friend could do. Therefore, a grateful thought of their image to a sincere murid, which is called Tassawuri Murshid, brings more power and inspiration than any other form of concentration. Sympathy is the only bridge that brings knowledge from one soul to another. That's the line I wanted to get to. Sympathy is the only bridge that brings knowledge from one soul to another. And that is why this concentration works. Because the sympathetic connection, opening up this doorway of sympathy, using the image of the teacher in this way, allows one to merge with the soul of that being. and to share their knowledge. My early experiences with Sam were just that way. You know, I was led here. I've told that story before, but then I began to have experiences of him coming to me, and when I would remember his voice or his image, then I couldn't do anything. I might be painting or whatever I was doing. Whatever it did, it just happened perfectly. So I began to have this sense of it, and recently I read this book. It's in the collection that Pirzia made on the Mughal treasury of teachings in India, from the Sufi teachers in India, and of a man that, and the section in the book is called The Compass of Truth, and it's about Dara Shikoh, who was the grandson of the Emperor Akbar, and who Murshid Sam felt, you know, it was like he said, I feel like I am him, you know, in a certain place in my being. I remember being him. I have an inner relationship with this particular being who, he was a great Gnostic, a greatly loved person who was assassinated by his brother, and that was the downfall of the whole Mughal Empire in India came from that point in time. But his teaching in there, he's giving this very profound Sufi practice of Chagall in this text. But he says, I'm doing this for people that didn't have the experience that I had of receiving the whole transmission simply by attunement with my teacher. His teacher was the famous Qadri Sheikh Mian Mir. But I mean, I just thought, wow, when I read it, because it's just so much right at the heart here. I was giving a talk at the Federation gathering recently, and I said, you know, getting down to the whole essence of the esoteric school, the inner teachings, I said, you could, if you had to throw everything out but one thing, if you just could retain Tassawuri Murshid, if you could just retain that sense that you are one with Murshid through a link of sympathy, you have the very knowledge of that being by this link of sympathy of heart in which you are functioning. Because that was the secret of why Sam's work continued in such a big way, is because we were able to catch that and to feel that sympathy, so that we had access, you know, even though we weren't ripe when he left, you know, because many of us had only been his students for 2 or 3 or 4 years at the most. But we had that sense of connection. And like he said to me before, he left to New York for that one long trip that he took. While in that period, he said to lead the dances in his absence, and he said, don't worry about it, don't think about it, don't talk too much about it, just tune into the way I am when I'm teaching and feel one with that, and do it. And that always worked, you know, just right before, just to feel that sense of presence, sympathize into it, to feel that vibration, and then it was right there. It was, now I don't know what's me and what's Sam, you know, in that sense, you know, because it's, I'm not in that particular phase, but I can always, if I need to find an inner place when I'm confused, I can always go right back to that place of connection, and that clarifies it for me. And it is all based on this. As Murshid says here, the first Murshid or teacher in life is the mother, and then comes the father. And when a child is taught to do a certain thing or not to do a certain thing, it depends upon the concentration of the child to act according to what he or she has learned. But what personifies all they have learned is the image of their mother. At the time of doing that which they ought not to do, the thought that comes to the concentrated mind of the child is the image of the one who has warned him or her not to do it. So, I mean, that's what he goes from there to this sense of how one has this sympathetic link with their teacher, which then allows them to grow in the way I said. For every form of learning, sympathy is the only bridge that brings knowledge, and this is true to a certain, that this is required to a certain extent in every form of learning. But the higher the knowledge, the greater the sympathy needed through which to receive it. It is clear in the words of Narada, who says, "My treasure cannot be taken by robbers." And Mahadeva says, "It is the sincerity of the chela that opens his inspiration." Mahadeva's Shiva. Krishna says, "I live in the heart of my devotee." And Hasranayat Khan said, "I learn more from my disciples than they learn from me." And the Murid makes the Murshid. You know, I mean, your intention, what your sense of drawing perfection through a sympathetic relationship makes it come through. As Murshid Sam said, I feel like a mother who, when the child comes to the breast, milk comes. You know, without that wish, without that connection, without that drawing forth, nothing comes. And so the appearance of all these people in his life allowed him to have a successful end, a completion. And I want to just present one more of these papers. Let's say the invocation together. Toward the one, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the Master, the Spirit of guidance. All goodness is really speaking beauty in thought, feeling, and manner of action. And to concentrate on the perfection of this beauty as one's Lord, Savior, this becomes concentration on Rasul. No one can concentrate on God because God is beyond all limitations and any limitation. Even goodness limits God. And for ages people have made this mistake. They have idealized God as goodness. Then for all evil they had to imagine a Satan. And therefore they have assigned a portion of the dominion to God and a portion to Satan. Perhaps a larger portion, for goodness is so little to be found and evil seems to be everywhere. The Sufi therefore looks upon God as the origin and end of all things, as within and without all things. The Sufi may consider it impertinence to say God is in evil, yet he or she does not exclude one single atom from the being of God. But goodness, which is the form of beauty, the Sufi idealizes in its perfection and personifies it in Rasul. But goodness, which is the form of beauty, the Sufi idealizes in its perfection and personalizes it in Rasul. And it is the concentration of Rasul which they hold in their thought. Man's whole conduct in life depends what he or she holds in their thought. The thought of the wicked produces wickedness, and the thought of the good creates goodness. The love of Rasul, the divine ideal, enables one to concentrate upon this ideal. Since all in the garb of matter are to be separated one day in life, good or wicked, friends or foes, what alone is reliable is the ideal which we create within ourselves. Call it Christ, Buddha, Krishna, or Muhammad. It is the human being's devotion that creates it. And the man or woman of tradition who fits it, the Sufi regards with this ideal. The human being is every means justified in doing so, for this is the best manner by which one attains perfection. So it's not out of, what can I say? It's that relationship exists to draw it forth out of you, to draw forth your ideal, your perfection, your unfoldment. And that sympathetic bridge is what allows it to flow. And the person that you look to in that way is, well, God says, I am as my lover imagines me to be. That's another way of saying the same thing. I am as my lover imagines me to be. As a thing is viewed, so it appears. So this is the key behind this practice. It's not because these people are beyond human, with no faults at all. Sam said, "Don't put me up on a pedestal after I'm gone," and everybody laughed because he was so obviously a person who had human limitations. And who would put him up on a pedestal? But now he's put up on this tremendous pedestal because the reality that was his reality is so vibrant and catchy. I mean, charismatic. He had that amazing ability to offer his magnetism to people in a way that they could claim it as their own and enliven themselves with it. But he didn't try to always come across, put a nice sheen on things. He was very unself-conscious that way. Yes?
I hope I'm not interrupting, but
No,
what keeps occurring to me, and that I still struggle with, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, is that for those of us who haven't had a teacher like Sam, somebody that we can really sort of walk on their footsteps, and I mean, obviously there are Murshids who have inspired me and so on, but if I'm drawn to a being like Kuan Yin, it's still somewhat of a mystery to me how I do the Tassawuri in that way.
Yeah.
I mean, there is an attunement, but it's like there's a part of me that's trying to translate this to that sense of someone who is not a human.
Yeah, but there's that, but Kuan Yin may be a composite of all the perfections in humanity viewed in a feminine way, but if you can really establish a true bridge of sympathy, she exists. It's like if you watch that movie on the Dalai Lama's life, where he's growing up in the movie, and there's a time where his teacher is talking to him and telling him about Tara, and he says, is she real or imaginary? And the teacher says, no, she's real. She's real. I mean, maybe it's a cosmic archetype, but she's real, you see. And you can have a real relationship with her. And even the limited beings that such as this person and others, that are functioning in this world, you can use, they don't have to be perfect. They just need to stand in the stream of beings as a representative of that perfection, you see. And by a sympathetic bridge with that, with one such as that, you have access to that whole stream because you're not holding yourself out as separated from it. You're yearning for that perfection. This is the vehicle that's been given to you as a representative of it, and by entering sincerely into a relationship with it, seeking to draw through that the perfection that you're seeking, it can work for you even. And that's why when I try to encourage the teachers in our order, don't be afraid. You know your limitations. You know you're not perfect, and yet at the same time, if you withdraw being available to people to use in this very way that we're talking, then you're robbing them of something that is important for them to get on the path. And it can't go to your head or your ego because it's got nothing to do with that. It has to do with function, your function. And you have to allow that function to be real enough in your sincerity of connecting. If your sincerity is true and you're connected with your guides, then they're connected in the same way that you are because they are drawing it forth from you like the mother's milk that is being drawn from. Or as the Nayat Khan says, the person who's looking for a teacher can find them anywhere, just like if you find, you can find water if you dig deep enough anywhere in the earth. It's your digging, it's your desire, it's your sense of drawing it forth and the perfection that you want to draw forth that will use that form and that vehicle, even if that vehicle turns out to be very disappointing in their own human limitations. It can still serve you in that way because you're authentic in your aspiration and because God is real and uses every form no matter how limited. So I just wanted to say this about it because it's a practice that people get very confused about in the sense of, am I giving over my power to somebody else? No. You're not. You're just finding that whatever they have, you also have, because the link of sympathy overcomes the isolation of your knowing and allows your knowing to now flow in a bigger way. So by being able to look at life from another's point of view as well as your own point of view, you don't lose your point of view, for example, you just broaden your view of what is. So are there other questions people want to go into? Yes, Janet.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, in your sympathy with Sam, did you also experience taking on some of his faults?
I did at a certain point. I felt like I didn't want, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? But sometimes, you get too much bathwater. So you got to find a way to throw the bathwater out. The Murshid Sam said, he had this inner relationship with Hazrat Inayat Khan in a very deep way. It was he said, everything in my life I owe to him. Everything worthwhile I've ever done, I owe to him. He changed my life. I feel the same way about him. But he said, but I'm going to make my own mistakes. I'm not going to make this. I'm going to make my own mistakes. I won't make his mistakes. So he'd come to the place where, like I said, he thought his mistake was not asserting his will in situations where people ought to have heard what he really wanted. And that made for a lot of the organizational confusion that happened afterwards. And so Sam wasn't hesitant to do that, and sometimes he did it in a way that was totally off the wall. And sometimes, when I tried to walk in his footsteps afterwards, for example, in this attunement, I found that I was using, Sam could explode and then it would be gone. He would let off this energy and it would be gone, and if you didn't react to it, it would wash right over you as a blessing. And that was what he would always say if he was going to blast you with this energy. Now, the first thing is don't react. Well, if you didn't react, you felt this goodwill and blessing. It didn't matter whether he was right or wrong. He was he was caring about you, and he was offering you a blessing in it. And then after he had corrected you in whatever manner he did, he was done with it. He left it all behind, ready to go on. But I found in my trying to emulate his rhythm that I was too hot. The heat that I generated was not exactly what was proper for my own style and personhood. And it was kind of like using a blowtorch to try and light a candle sometimes. And you see plenty of fire, but what you got in the end is a big gooey mess, you know. And I had a lot of big gooey mess situations that came from my trying to emulate Murshid and being way too fiery and not having the perfection of that fieriness because it was not as natural a quality in me. And as a result, I could name a dozen times where I regret, being... now, when I bring it out, it's very conscious, and it's like you bring the dragon up out of the basement, and all of a sudden, otherwise it's living down here, doesn't have anything to do with it. And I find that it comes out much, much less often, and I find that there are a lot of things that you can do with a very gentle touch that doesn't require that kind of heavy-handedness. So that people have found me, as I've gotten older, a lot more approachable than they used to find me. For example, I see people nodding their heads. And that's because I've learned that I didn't need to emulate that. What I needed to emulate was something I also had, but I could let that go, you see. So that's my best way of trying to answer that question. You did have something on this?
I was just wondering, the word sympathetic to me usually means feeling someone's pain or sympathy card, or so I have a very limited...
What does the word empathy do for you?
Empathy means you can understand or relate to, whereas sympathetic is feeling sorry or...
Yeah, the word unfortunately has taken that turn in the last 50 or 60 years. So sympathy now has connotations, as you said, of feeling sorry for somebody.
Yeah.
That's not the sense in which Hazrat Khan is using it. He's using it sympathetic connection, empathetic connection, connection of heart, connection of feeling. You're able to feel with someone and be there with them in their feeling. That's a sympathetic connection. And Hazrat Khan says that's the essence of religion, is having that kind of connection with God. That sympathetic connection of love is the whole essence of it. Only now I'm using the word empathy more because it's a word that has more of the meaning that we want to convey with it. But that's what causes the bridge is. And I know that, people said, well, why did you get so much from Sam? And I said, well, he was always saying in his classes, I need help around here. And I had time to give help, so I came over most every day to help. And that created in him a lot of sympathy for me because I was giving him something that he really needed, and he was very grateful for that. So while I had a sympathetic connection with him, his heart was really open to me because I was meeting a need of his too. And his heart was open to all his murids, but how did they feel it? I was here and it was palpable, so I could feel that coming to me in the course of serving him, doing things. So I think it's because of that. Sympathetic connection, it works both ways. You have to open the door, because how much are we willing to let in of the goodwill that may be coming to us from a friend, for example. If you really trust a friend who's a friend of your soul, you may be very open to it, or you may still, because of your own conditioning, have a little bit of an aperture that maybe gets a little bigger. And as far as the teacher is concerned, whatever you give is sufficient. But as far as we're concerned, it would be beautiful to be able to have, a wide open space where we become a true conduit of this whole stream of blessing from God, so that all these qualities are alive in us. They're the part of ourself that is functioning here in the world. So, anyway, I'm beginning to get those inner warning signals saying, it happens a little late in the day when you've been teaching all day, and then you talk more than is your wish to do. But I feel good about our process here, and I tell myself every time I'm teaching, don't push, don't try and do too much, don't always feel that more is better. Allow things to just have the space that they need. And that's one thing I like about this program, is that, no matter what we accomplish, we're in it here for a period of time that allows for us to deepen in it in a natural way. And so I'm grateful for that.
So are we.
Yeah. So that's what makes it work. We have a mutual link of empathy around this process, and so the Spirit of Guidance is able to use us to grow. And I think I'll be willing to respond to other questions if there's questions about any of our practice or what has come up for you. But my sense is, let's do a short meditation. We'll conclude for the evening, and let's just do for our meditation the Fikr of the Zikr. So exhaling La ilaha and inhaling Illallahu. As we exhale the La ilaha, we're letting go of everything that claims to stand alone. Nothing stands alone. Everything that's transient, everything that has an end, we let go of it. And as we inhale Illallahu, we feel the reality of the one and only being. We are part of it. So offering up, letting go as we exhale the La ilaha, and drawing in the reality of that which is and always will be as we inhale the Illallahu. Thank you. God bless you and keep you. May you be happy. May you be peaceful. May you be free. May your practice ever grow in strength